I think it's important that we are transparent in the conversation. We are able to take everyone along in relation to the kind of progress and or lack of progress that we could be making against the targets that we have set ourselves. As we know that the month of July marked the first anniversary of the Energy Action Plan, which is a coherent and comprehensive response to the energy crisis in the country. As everyone knows that load shedding is causing untold devastation on the South African economy. There's a lot of people that are out of jobs. There are companies that have folded. Farmers are finding it very difficult to continue to produce. Retailers are having to expend a lot of upfront capital cost to meet the requirements associated with the buying of generators and also the operational costs for purposes of keeping the cold chain and their operations going. Small businesses in the townships are finding it very difficult to continue to operate. Investors can't find a legitimate reason why they have to continue to invest in the South African economy, and therefore there's an opportunity cost associated with load shedding. So we're using this the occasion of this weekly briefing to share with you the kind of progress that we are making. I want to say from the onset that as indicated before, I mean, we will be occasioning a briefing that is going to have a focus on the distribution side of the energy ecosystem in the country. Of course, as I do all the time, we do give you insights in relation to the generation side, both ESCOM and the performance of, or rather the degree to which we are able to incorporate the new generation capacity, especially from renewable energy sources. So that's the information that we get to give you every Sunday. And then we also occasion an opportunity where we shared with you comprehensively the work that we're doing on the transmission side, the degree to which we are able to expand the transmission network, the kind of ticket rent value that is required for us to be able to attain the network expansion, network strengthening to accommodate renewables and also to reconfigure if you like, the generation complexion in the country. And of course, the one area that has not been received attention on this platform is the one on distribution. I'm raising that because we get to have an inordinate amount of calls and conversation with municipalities, the big ratepayer organizations in the country. They lament the fact that even outside the load shedding schedules, they are unable to get electricity. Just yesterday, I was speaking to one MEC who was indicating to me that there's a particular municipality, part of that municipality has not received electricity for the past 2 weeks. And of course, that has to do with the issues of debt that is owed to ESCOM. It has to do with the capacity of the municipality to refurbish, replenish the existing assets to make sure that they are able to accommodate for suburbs and settlements that are expanding. They are exceeding their notifiable demand. By that I mean they have entered into a contract with ESCOM to say that this is going to be their peak demand, and you find that they are exceeding that peak demand as a result of a proliferation of settlements, some of them connecting illegally, placing a significant amount of burden on existing infrastructure, which infrastructure is not designed to accommodate the kind of expansion that they've been experiencing. And as a result, then creeps into the conversation something called load reduction. So even outside the load shedding, municipalities must find a way of how they are going to distribute the load in their own areas. And of course, that speaks to the fact that the assets are not designed to accommodate the kind of demand and the pressures that is placed on those assets. And you find that some of this distribution infrastructure, the transformers, they explode as a result of First, underinvestment. Second, as a result of this continued load. And then municipalities are not sitting with the necessary capital because of the erosion of their revenue base, the issues around financial pressures in those localities, and as a result, they are unable to replace these assets. And the primary victims there are businesses, they are consumers who have not received electricity for a long period of time. So we are having those conversations, just trying to find an instrument of how best we could be in a position to work with municipalities to address that situation. Of course, the Minister of Finance has introduced conditions associated with the debt relief for to extinguish the debt, the historic debt that we have with Eskom. There's a set of conditions that must be met. So we will be working with the Treasury to do exactly that. And of course, Eskom is an indispensable player in that conversation. So I really want to say that we are aware of that. The office has been receiving that kind of information. We're giving it our attention, and the coming week we'll be engaging with those municipalities in parallel to a more enduring solution on how best to address this situation. I also want to welcome our colleagues from Eskom, both generation, transmission and distribution. They are well represented here. So let me just go through what has been the situation over the past week. So the first thing is that there's considerable improvement again on the generation side. The capacity available now, you can see that we are beginning to normalize available capacity to be upwards of 29,000 megawatts. So in some instances, very close to that, but we are getting to a situation thanks to the leadership of Eskom, starting with the board led by Mr. Makwana, the acting CEO, Mr. Kasim, but more importantly, the head of generation, Mr. Begin Numalo, and the rest of his team, men and women who are just committed to the resolution of this problem located at the various power stations. They are doing everything possible to ensure that we are able to lift available capacity. So for the past week, and I'm counting from Monday to Friday of last week, the generation averaged about 28,932 megawatts. And you can see that on 2 occasions in the week, on the 8th and also the 10th, we had breached 29,000 megawatts. So for me, I think it's an illustration of the consistency on the generation side. I do make the point that, of course, during winter, demand did surge, and of course, the instrument that the system operator has to balance the grid was to ensure that you intensify the stages of load shedding, and the expectation is that now we are entering the less severe periods of cold, and of course, demand is going to taper down. So what you're going to see that as we're improving the generation side, what the team will be doing to ensure that there's long-term sustainability of these units, they are becoming more reliable, is to ramp up planned outages. And you can see now that the planned outages are gradually being ramped up. Remember when we went into the winter period, we said that the deliberate action to take out the units for service was going to be reduced so that we have as many units as possible producing the megawatts. Now that generation is gradually improving, you can see that we've reached now the 60% energy availability factor comfortably, and then also that demand is coming down. The logical reason approach was that let's be expedient, let's not have load shedding at all. But our working with Eskom, we say that for long-term sustainability, it's important that philosophy maintenance, we continue to take out these units as and when we deem it necessary, and that's what Mr. Numalo and the team are doing, and we can see that plant maintenance is gradually going up, and that's what takes out, if you like, our ability to reduce the intensity of load shedding. It's short-term pain, but long-term gain, because when these units come back, I'm going to illustrate to you in this presentation that when they come back, then they sustain the levels of performance that they approximate their design conditions. So it's important that we apply that science in how we are going to resolve the load shedding problem. I think the most expedient way to do it is to stand before you and say we have ended load shedding, whilst in fact we are not sure about the reliability of these units, and that's why Mr. Nxumalo and his competent team of men and women are doing everything possible to the extent that to which we are able to take out these units. We'll continue to take them out. Even when they are giving us the megawatts, but we know that they are due for service, we'll take them out to fix them so that we are very deliberate, intentional in how we address the situation going forward. Again, as a result of the efforts that they've been doing, the unplanned capacity loss factor, that is the units just tripping and failing on their own, is beginning to taper down. Remember that there were periods where it hit about 18,000 megawatts. So we have averaged the past week about 15,000 megawatts. And I know that when we spoke to Mr. Nxumalo, we really want to put it at sub 14,000 megawatts. And you can see that on the 10th of August, we're at about just about 14,000 megawatts. And that's it's a benchmark going forward. We want to make it sub 14,000 megawatts, and that speaks to the reliability of these units. And as they become more and more reliable, we are able to do what we call good maintenance, opportunity maintenance. We take out those units that they might be at risk going into the future of failing. We fix them so that we eliminate that risk. An area that continues to be an albatross is the one on the partial load losses. So essentially, these units are not performing at the right levels, although they are giving us the megawatts, but it's not at the levels that are desired. Of course, you can see that we're sitting at 6,226 megawatts, and I'll share with you a bit more on the kind of efforts that we're doing, especially on the major culprits, the power stations that are responsible for a disproportionate contribution to the partial load losses that is receiving significant attention, so that we are able to bring them down. Again, as expected, the weather is becoming warmer and warmer, cooler, and then it will become warmer again. Peak PM forecast is now at about the average last week at 29,371 megawatts. Of course, just a confirmation that really the temperatures are going up. People are less intense on the use of appliances, the use of heating sources that eats into the available generation. Of course, you do expect that the trend line will continue to go down. Demand goes down. We are improving on generation. We are getting to a period where the intensity of load shedding will go down. But like I said before, what we're going to do and will not compromise on is on philosophy maintenance, plan maintenance, so that we are able to guarantee the performance of these units going into the future. Again, we are working very hard on improving the outage slips. I did make the point that the month of July was, we showed exceptional performance. We averaged about 1,300 megawatts of outage slips rather. Outage slips means that our ability to keep to our promise to retain the units at the time at which we had committed to retaining them. If we fail to retain those units at that time, that gets to be accounted into what we call the outage slips. The lower the outage slips means there's better planning. We're able to give the country some degree of assurance of available capacity. We're able to control, if you like, the intensity of load shedding. We don't have to revise it every other hour. Daphne has got the most difficult task of having to update every time when there's a notice going out. We know that the stages are getting more intense. So it's something that we want to address going into the future. Again, if you were to use the May month as a baseline, I did say to the country that when we came into the space much earlier, mid-April, we know that the EAF was at a historic low of about 48%, and the team of Mr. Ngumalo and the men and women that are at the various power stations, they were able to lift it up, and now we're beginning to average 60% EAF, an improvement of 12 percentage points. And I did say that we're going to now use the month of May as a baseline, so that we're able to have an appreciation of what the trend line is. So what is the trend line in relation to available capacity? At May, we're sitting at 27,000 megawatts. We lifted that during the period of July to about 28,600 megawatts, essentially added 1,600 more megawatts, and now we are breaching, about to breach the 29,000 megawatts. We are sitting at 28,942 megawatts. So from the May period to where we are now, we have added, if you like, just shy of 2,000 megawatts. And if you had to use that number, that 1 percentage point increase amounts to 477 megawatts. So you can see that that improvement is about 4.5 percentage point, 4.7 rather percentage point that we have registered over the period starting May to now. And then, of course, peak focus is something that is out of our control. May was averaging about 31,000 megawatts. June was, July averaging about 29,000 megawatts. And of course, we're still there, 29,000 megawatts. This is going to come down, and that's why we are saying that it's going to provide some degree of relief on the intensity of load shedding, but we're also going to use the opportunity to do, if you like, planned maintenance. And then on the issues of planned outages, during May, we're sitting at about 3,400. Of course, this one is it's an inverse of the rest. The more we're able to do planned maintenance, it speaks to our ability and confidence that the units are going to become more reliable, but also that opportunity for increased planned maintenance is a function of the available capacity. So the more it rises, two things should be noted. It means that rising without intensifying load shedding, it means that the available capacity is going up, the performance of these units is going up on a consistent basis, and we want to show up that consistent performance by taking out these units, fixing them, and of course you can see now the first week or so of August, we are beginning to ramp it up. And of course, that gets to be accommodated by the fact that demand is going down and by the fact that available generation is improving. And Mr. Ngumalo and the team are able to do everything possible to address the situation going into the future. Again, similarly, we'll be bringing down the unplanned capacity loss factor. The more we take out these units, we fix them, we have some degree levels of confidence, the more we eliminate this unplanned capacity loss factor, the more we initiate other efforts to address the issues on the emission side so that we don't exceed the emission license parameters, the more we're able to run these units. And I'll share with you one or two power stations where we are paying attention. I did promise the last time that we will attempt, to the extent that this platform allows, just for you to have a sense of how are these individual power stations working. Of course, hitherto, I've been giving you the aggregate performance of the generating performance on the ESCOM side is the aggregation of all these power stations put together. Now I'm dismantling them. We're disaggregating them, going into each and every power station, and that's the science that Mr. Ngumalo and the team are using. So it's one thing for me to say that the energy availability factor is, we are lifting it up now. We are averaging comfortably above 60%, but it's important to know which are those power stations that are carrying the disproportionate amount of the weight, that are essentially lifting this energy availability factor. But also we need to understand which are those power stations, that they are dragging us down. And for us, we are making that point for purposes of just illustrating that we are initiating interventions to work with the teams there. And they know, I mean, we've given them our stamp of approval. We are working with them to ensure that we are going to improve the performance of these power stations. Mr. Numano takes it to even a granular level. He asked the question, which of these units are underperforming? He asked another question, what about the underperformance of these units? What are the technical areas that requires attention? And is able to summon the necessary capacity and expertise to resolve that precise problem. And you will see that we're able to lift the energy availability factor. So we've categorized them into three. So the first category is those power stations that have maintained an energy availability factor of about 60%. And I must say that those that you will find that are underperforming is really as a result of historic reasons. And those historic reasons, I did say, we are addressing them, working with the leadership of ESCOM. Of course, Medupi, you would expect that. I mean, it's the newest in the fleet. We expect nothing less than they've given us the month of July. They were averaging 88% energy availability factor. You can't expect anything less than that. Of course, we are working on Unit 4 of Medupi. We did give you an indication that Mr. Ngumalo and the team, Karabo there, they've found a way rather of finding a spare unit that can help us to truncate the return of Unit 4 in Medupi. And once that comes into the picture, we are projecting that will happen by April of next year, 2024. The initial estimation was May of 2025, so we've truncated that period by almost a year as a result of these efforts by the head of generation. Letabo is giving us 86%. Congratulations to the team. Matimba is giving us 72%. Camden is giving us 66%. As an anecdote, I mean, Camden was going to be one of those casualties that was meant to be closed. And of course, as part of the conversation to say, let's delay the decommissioning of this unit so that we continue to exploit these assets to give us the necessary megawatts. And we are very grateful that the Cabinet has agreed, ESCOM has agreed, let's delay the decommissioning without tampering with our agenda on the decarbonization, meeting our international obligation with regards to the net zero part. And then Duva, I think, is a shining example there. I think the team have really lifted the effort there. So we're averaging about 62% there at Duva, and at Majuba we are at 60%. And this kind of performance, by the way, of all these 6 power stations I've mentioned, has been very consistent since the period of May. And if anything, there's been marginal improvement going upwards. But really what we are seeing now is a consistent improvement over a period of time. And these are the stations that really are anchoring this performance, and they make it possible for us to undermine the intensity of load shedding. Of course, the Quebec story, the second category is those that are between 40 and 59%. And I'm starting with Quebec. Quebec, we have 2 units, 1 unit is out. The most you can get there is 50% EAF, and of course, we have been getting about 48% EAF at the unit 2 that is in operation. And then at Matla, of course, there's been some deterioration starting from May. We're at 54, June it lifted, July it went down to 47%. These are power stations. Of course, the units, they pack significant megawatts. I think it's about 500 or 600 megawatts. So it's important that we pay particular attention to this. We did share with you the last time, one of the briefings, that Matla is one of the stations that are beneficiaries to the work that we are doing with the private sector within the context of the Resource Mobilization Fund. So we've attempted to isolate and identify those units. That gives us the best opportunity to improve the overall energy availability factor. And we do that by, one, asking the question, what is the amount of megawatts that we get per individual unit at the power station X, and what is the performance of of that power station, and then we are able to isolate those units that are able to give us the best return. So essentially, if you have a unit that packs 600 megawatts, power stations, that is the average size of the units there, and then it's performing under 50%, we know if we were to exert ourselves there, we are likely going to get a significant amount of return. Anode gives us 44%. The EAF, again, it's a downward trend from 49% in May, went to 46% in June, 44% in July. Kendall, and really Kendall, yeah, it has to do with the issues of us exceeding the license parameters with regards to emissions level, something that is receiving attention, and we did share with you the kind of interventions we are making. Of course, Kendall is also one of those that benefiting from the work that we are doing with the private sector. Again, it was at 42% in May, it went up to 50% in June, and again, it has come down to 42%. And then there's Krill, again, a significant amount of opportunity then at Krill. It also has to do with the issues of emission level. It's a function of the cooling towers. The work that we're doing there will give us significant results. As I'm speaking to you, is giving us an EAF of 40%, and we know we can do significantly better because those units are big units, and 40% really, it's an injustice on what the team is capable of achieving. And I did make the point that part of the underperformance we are seeing here, it's a function of historic reasons. Historic in this instance, I'm referring to Eskom's inability to invest in the maintenance. And the 254 billion rand fiscal injection that has been extended to Eskom, the lifeline by the Minister of Finance. Remember, part of those conditions is that you must direct this money towards maintenance. And that's what has given Mr. Ngumalo and the rest of his team an ability to invest that money in these power stations. And we can share with you the amount of work that we are doing. I mean, at Kendall, as I'm speaking to you, we are working on the reliability of the auxiliary plants. Unit 4 is busy with commissioning after the emission project update. Like I said, the issue there is about the emissions. And once we are able to address issues that are going to make it possible for us to run this unit to approximate the installed, if you like, capacity, the better we are able to improve the energy availability factor. But we are unable to do that because once the team ramps up the performance of those units, it increases our allowable permissions parameters, it exceeds them, and therefore will be in breach of the license conditions, and we can be taken to court, and also are putting lives of communities within an area in danger, and that's not our intention, and that's why we are doing everything possible to ensure that we are addressing the issues around the emissions. And then there are the ones that are really complicit for really dragging us down. Like I said, it's not a reflection of the general managers, their competency and ability at these power stations. So you can see Hendrina, we're only getting 27%. And then we have appointed a new GM in June, and now it's running 3 of the 6 units starting to improve the EAF. We are going to see it now in the month of August going into the future. We are applying ourselves there in Hendrina. Again, Grootfontein, the last time the one unit, Unit 2, was taken out because of the fire. I did report the last time that it's coming back. I think we're running on just 2 units. They are making every effort possible to address that situation. And that's why the EAF, the energy availability factor, is sitting at 27%. And Kusile, the challenges are well documented. So the 3 units are out. Essentially, they, I think, we are running on 1 unit. So we will address the Kusile problem. I do give you regular updates. We expect we'll be firing Unit 5, I think, by the end of October. One of the first of the 3 units will come on stream by the 1st of December, or the last week of November, and the last of the 3 units that had been taken out as a result of the the issues around the flue gas desulfurization unit will come on stream projection. We are still on that timeline, will come on stream by the 24th of December. So Kusile, we know what the problems are. One of the two units, youngest power station, is giving us just 19%. So we know what the problems are. And then again, the station that is giving us an opportunity going into the future is Tutuka. You see, we are at 13%. So it's important that we do everything possible, address the issues of the breakdown stretching to December of 2022. I think receiving attention, as you know, I did indicate that one of the best knowledgeable general managers on the generation side, significant amount of experience, Mr. Bruce Moyo, has been assigned that responsibility by Mr. Numalo to address the situation at Tutuka, and we really expect that come the end of August, mid-September, we should be able to be retaining some of this unit on stream, and we will be able to make significant improvements on that 13%. So we thought that it's important that we get to disaggregate the performance. Like I said, 3 categories, 60%, they are in their own category. And of course, when we make this kind of improvements that we continue to make, we are going to draw new categories. Now we are going to have a category of 70% going upwards. I'm very optimistic about the future. Mr. Numalo, I know, in the team, I mean, we set the bar very high. So we know that with the experience we have, the kind of support we are getting from the board, the kind of support we got from the Minister of Finance, the work that is being done in other areas of ESCOM, we are going to improve this energy availability factor. But we are very modest. We move from a low base. What has been the immediate target? Let's improve this to 60% plus. And that's why we are sharing that with you. Those within the band of 40 to 59% is another category, and those that are really weighing us down as a result of historic reason, they are sub 40%, we also get to categorize them. And you are going to see that we'll be making this gradual improvement. In some other stations, it's going to be very rapid. I mean, Kusile, once those units come back, is going to be very rapid. And we know what the problems are. We are attending to them. Others requires an exceptional study on the root causes, and as we get to fire them, you find that the exercise gets to fail, we pull them back, we still need to do other iterations of technical work, and that's the kind of patience that is applied by Mr. Numalo and his competent team of men and women at ESCOM. And of course, the picking plants, really, they are meant to do exactly that. Of course, we have been running them as base load, undermining their engineering and economic, if you like, lifestyle, life, because of they are not meant to be run at those levels. It's something that they were addressing. Once we improve generation performance, EAF will run them at the levels that are desired. So I really wanted to say that we're making everything possible, focusing on the individual power stations. Like I said, we'll come back to you now, focusing on the distribution side there. Thank you, Sis Nomon.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that information. We're now going to be moving to the questions, colleagues. But we'll start by introducing the team that is assisting here, assisting Minister, in terms of providing more technical information. Next to the Minister, we have Usis Stephanie Mukwena from ESCOM. And next to her, we have Silas Zim, who's the advisor of the Minister. And next to him, we have Mr. Beki Numalo, who's the head of generation from ESCOM. And next to him, we have Rudy Dix from Presidency. We all know him. And next to him, we have Budmonde Bala. And then next to him, we also have Mr. Jacob Mashinike. They are both from ESCOM, from the distribution team. So colleagues, we're now going to be taking questions. We'll start in the room. You introduce yourself and the media house that you represent, and then you ask the questions, and then after we'll move to the online questions. Aviwe, I see your hand. Okay, I see that one as well. So we'll start with Aviwe, and then we move to the next colleague.
Well, thank you. Aviwe from eNCA.
Thank you. I'm from eNCA. Minister, you seem to paint a positive picture in terms of the energy availability factor. Does this mean that you will have any relief in sight in terms of the load shedding schedules? You will see, greater load shedding schedules. And I mean, you started the briefing in painting the reality of the impacts that the blackouts are having on the economy. When will we possibly see, the back of load shedding in time? Maybe just clarity on that. You also mentioned that there will be a briefing on distribution. Maybe just to get an indication, we saw the letter that came out from Minister Ramokgopa. Maybe you can give clarity on when we'll see that process complete. And obviously, the people that are disgruntled, for example, just before this briefing, we saw a letter from the National Union of Mine Workers suggesting that they were consulted around the distribution, the selling off of the distribution to the state-owned new company. Maybe you can also get clarity on that. And the generation side, we've seen the transmission already, that process of unbundling happening. We've seen the beginning of the process now in the distribution side. What's going to happen with the generation? Will it be sold off also soon?
Okay. Thank you, Abu. Yes.
Good morning, Minister. My name is Ramokgopa. I'm from Reuters. I have actually 3 questions, or maybe 2 questions, clubbed into 3 perhaps. First is, when you said that there will be, you are aiming for an unplanned outage of around 14,000 megawatts. Is there some kind of a timeline that you want to achieve in terms of when you reach there comfortably and be there, so that we know that from 15, if we reach 14,000, which means one more stage of load shedding has been reduced? So that is the first question. Secondly, you said that you have discussed the government and ESCOM and all the stakeholders, and you have decided that the life of Camden will be extended as we had expected it would be done. So is that the process in which you had earlier told us that you will be extending or deciding to extend the lives of several power plants based on which have a higher EAF or which can be extended? So is this the decision on Camden is a part of that? And what about the other power plants that we wanted to understand in terms of when do you actually extend, or when do we decide that we will be extending the life of those power plants?
Right. Thank you so much. Penny, can you take us through the online questions?
Yes, thank you, Gigi. It's quite a number, and with each saying 4 or 3 at a stage, so you'll decide where I stop. Helmo from Independent Media has got about 4 questions. The first one, any update on why June power imports were less than January? The second one, was there any load shedding on Wednesday? Third one, when are we likely to reach 32,000 megawatts capacity in terms of availability? The fourth one is, what is the load factor on the IPP power plants? The next question is from Jan Grenier from News 24. He's asking what is the status on the search for a permanent CEO for ESCOM. Moving on, we have another 4 set of questions from Media 24, Network Business, William Horn. The first question, will ESCOM increase plant maintenance to more than the percentage that was managed in 2022 this year during summer? The second one, what is the plan to supplement ESCOM's rapidly depleting diesel budget for OCGTs? The latest data indicated 30 billion annual budget for this financial year is running out faster than planned. Question 3, what are the plans?
Maybe Penny, let's pause there. Then we can allow the response to questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. You can continue.
Right. We still for consequence management at Quebec, given the active delay now to November in putting back 21 online. What is the latest update on the search for a new CEO for ESCOM? We move on to Chris Yellen, EE Business Intelligence. First question, please, can Minister Ramokgopa comment on a further extension of Quebec Unit 1 return to service to 3 November 2023, announced by the ESCOM CNO, I'm not sure there's a CNO or CO, Keith Featherstone last week, and the associated risks to South Africa. Question 2, please can Minister Ramokgopa update us on increased imports from Mozambique, Zambia, and Botswana? Has there a report from the VGBE Energy Consortium been finalized and submitted to National Treasury and ESCOM? And will the report be made publicly available? What are the timelines for the operationalization of the National Transmission Company of South Africa? William Horn, again, Media 24, is asking, is the new power station manager of Tutuga also wearing a bulletproof vest, or is his safety now improved upon the previous management experience? Terence Klima from Engineering News asks, given that bid window 7 of the new Bros procurement program will be launched soon, can we expect ESCOM to publish an updated generation connection capacity assessment before then? And what progress has been made to secure a settlement on the grid queuing rules? The last question from Terence, is the Minister convinced that Quebec Unit 1 will indeed return to operation on 3 November and ahead of Unit 2's outage on November 7? Does he expect the Unit 1 and 2 licenses to be separated and the life extension license to be approved by 21 July 2024? If not, should we prepare for long periods without Quebec generation again next year and into 2025? One more question from Homulemo, UFM. Is asking how much was spent on diesel from May this year to date as compared to last year, the same period. Final question from Chris Yellen for this round. Please advise average EFF for Kendall Power Station. Thank you, Gigi.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay, we'll have Peggy coming through and then Rudy following, then we'll have Minister coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Good morning, members of the media. Let me deal with the Quebec's questions first that have come through. In terms of the focus now is to get Quebec back online. I think the other issues that are dealt with in terms of any possible consequence management and those matters, we will deal with those processes as the time comes. But the focus now is really to ensure that the Quebec unit is coming back. I think the good news that I can share is that at least now the major work on the replacement of the steam generators have been completed. Now we are at a period where we are dealing with the normal maintenance now that we will do as part of the job that we normally do, which is we've got much experience on. So that gives us that comfort that the date of the 3rd of November we should be able to meet. But we are obviously working hard with the team to try and be earlier than that date. So far, since we have started taking over the maintenance, we are still on the schedules that we have to meet that timelines. I think the other point that has come in terms of the Tutuga, in terms of the EAF, the minister did share with we are working. We are planning to at least get to 4 units. We are already back to now 2 from this week. We're planning to get another unit later this month as well. So Tutuga, I think our plans are going to start to show a bit later. Whether the power station general manager is wearing a bulletproof, but I must indicate that we take the safety of all the employees on site extremely seriously, where assessments are done and they warranted that it get done. But for now, the power station manager is doing the job without wearing the bulletproof, which is what we want to see, because our employees at power stations, they are serving this country, so they shouldn't be threatened for doing such. Yeah. So we are quite grateful that he doesn't have to wear bulletproof. I think the issue of the extensions of the unit, the minister did touch on it. It's not only Camden. You see, you will recall that it was a cluster of stations, including currently Camden, Groote Bay, and also Hendrina. So we are assessing all of those units. You will see that good thing that with assistance from government and also from the board, we have been given money also to do maintenance on these plants. And the good news as well that all these older plants, they were fitted with the latest technology in terms of the emissions controls, in terms of the bags. So they are not the worst emitters as well. So we are working on all of them. So once we have got that to the board to get approval in terms of our proposal, we will communicate with the public. But we are looking at the whole fleet. So I can report that we've been given money to do maintenance on all of them as part of our life cycle management of the power stations. The issue of the diesel, and maybe let me touch on that. I think for the past quarter for this year, with the diesel, we were planning to have, we had 9.7 billion. We are still currently at 9.2. So in terms of if you accumulate from May up to end of June, so we are still within target. The idea is really for us is to improve on the EAF, because that automatically will also reduce on the diesel ban. It's not really to look at what we have as a budget. The less we use on that, I think this month has been much better as well in terms of the utilization, while we are balancing the start of the major outages that are happening. Minister, I think I've covered the key issues. I'm not too sure if there's something that I'm missing.
Good morning. My name is Monde Bala. I've been asked to comment about the, I'm the distribution group executive. I've been asked to comment about the queuing rules and where we are on the queuing rules. So on the 27th of June, we published the interim grid connection rules, which in our view we had widely consulted with all industry role players. We do take note that there was one of the interested party that took us to court. That matter is currently in court. The one part of the first phase of that court intended interdict was dealt with. So we are continuing with the application of the rules as we have them. We are mindful of the fact that they still need to be undertaken through the NERSA process in terms of codification, but yeah, we're also mindful of the pending court case. So in as far as the rules are concerned, we are implementing the rules as they have been published at the moment. Just on the distribution unbundling, Rudy will talk a bit more about it, but just to say that the process of distribution and bundling started with the announcement of the ESCOM roadmap in 2019. It did not start with the publication of the letter that we saw last week. So that process involves quite a number of steps which we had been undertaking for the past year and a half, such as the registration of the distribution entity, the PFMA1 approval, which was secured from both the Ministers of Minister of Finance and also the Minister of Public Enterprise. We are now at the PFMA2 stage. I think it's important also to note that the PFMA2 was approved by the Minister of Finance back in, I think, somewhere mid-2022. The Minister of Public Enterprise had some issues which we had addressed. Now we are sitting at the stage whereby with the Public Enterprise Minister has conditionally approved the PFMA2 application. There's quite a number of steps that must follow, such as lender consent, such as major agreements that still need to follow, but more importantly, the issue of taking our employees along on this unbundling process. So, Rudy?
It's perhaps important to clarify, we're not selling off anything, right? Because I think that's first the one thing that I wanted to just clarify, because I think it's important that Cabinet adopted the decision to unbundle ESCOM as part of a long-term process way back. But I think in 2019, if one looks at the much more closer decision that set out the roadmap for that. And of course, the first element of that was to set up a subsidiary, which is, I mean, we had great pains. We explained it last week again, but we don't mind doing it again. That we set up a subsidiary as part of that process, which is transmission. Now, of course, that process is nearing its completion. For it to be operationalized, that National Transmission Company of South Africa requires its operational license. There are 3 license applications that are, one has been given, which is the system operator license. The other 2, which is the import-export license and the trading license, is still pending, right? So already that's the first phase. What has already happened is the separation of financial accounts, already allocations of staff, those issues around restructuring that requires to happen. So similarly, what will happen, as Monday suggests, as Monday had indicated, will happen to distribution. It would mean that ESCOM will remain with generation, and the generation space would be a competitive space as it is right now, which then allows for the transmission company with its functions to purchase electricity from generators, which will include private generators. And this is part of the long-term unbundling process, which includes the reform program related to the Electricity Regulator Act that is currently before Parliament for consideration in creating a competitive generation market. So I think it's important to stress that we're not selling off anything. It's rather the unbundling to allow for greater private sector participation in generation. The National Transmission Company will remain at its end state. So while it's a subsidiary right now, right, its end state will be owned by, because it's the backbone of the country, right, it will be owned by the state at the end of the day. The questions around how we deal with distribution is what Monday had covered. So I thought that's quite important to just clarify that, right? The second point that I think Becky has asked me just to highlight is that the colleagues at ESCOM are engaging with the regulator around Kuburg. So that is an ongoing conversation. Of course, we can't speak on behalf of the regulator, but simply that engagement will continue in relation to that. With regard to the load factor for IPP, as it is right now, it's at about, it would always be close to about 30%, but as I understand right now, the precise figure for the load factors for IPP is around 22%, right? So that is where we're at with that. If I may just talk, sorry colleagues, if you don't mind if I think we've got the data for the diesel, right? Because I think that's always been a question that we've never really got to answer. So if one looks at the diesel that was burnt for May, right? Let's look at first the total number of gigawatt hours. So for May, the actual was 716 gigawatt hours. The total Spend was 4.5 billion rand for May, right? Now, that is obviously high, and as you recall, May was a significantly difficult month for us, as many of the units had tripped and failed, and of course the burn rate for the OCGTs was quite high. But if you look at the diesel to date so far, right, and again, what we have for this financial year is that we've actually, the total number of energy in terms of gigawatt hours has been just under 2,000 gigawatt hours, and we're well on budget, right? So budget for the expenses for diesel burn up until the end of July has been 12.4 billion. That was budgeted. We're actually spending 12.416 billion. So I think that's quite important to show that we are on budget, and we intend to maintain that budget that is going to be spent going forward. Minister, I just want there was one more question. Okay, so I've covered diesel spent May to date. Yeah, for Kendall, but we know what is, Becky had covered the grid queuing rules. We've had a very interesting conversation on that. And then transmission company of South Africa, we've clarified that again. I think Chris had asked the dates. We don't have that yet, Chris. Again, there is, similarly, we're engaging with the regulator. We'll continue to engage with the regulator on the outstanding two licenses. As I've mentioned, it's the import-export license and it's the trading license. We do require that to operate, right? That's going to be quite important for us. So the license for the transmission license is not sufficient. We have to require those other two licenses, and we'll have to engage with the regulator to try and see whether there's a process to expedite. Again, I'm at great pains to explain, it's an independent regulator. We can't determine what the decision they're going to make. All we can do is, of course, engage with them and ensure that they understand the reasons for why it's important for us to operationalize the transmission company. And the minister has indicated that he will continue to engage with the minister and the entity to be able to understand why it's going to be quite significant for us to be able to ensure that we do get those operational licenses, and that, of course, that would allow then for the National Transmission Company of South Africa to operate. Minister, I'll leave all the difficult questions to you.
Thank you very much to colleagues. I think it's important that I just put the issues of the diesel into context. Becky and Rudy do make the point that we remain within budget, and in fact we are 600 million less than what we had planned to spend. So remember when I stood before you, when we were sharing with you the ESCOM winter outlook, I did say that it's going to be anchored on 3 interventions. The first intervention was the continued improvement of the energy availability factor, the work that Mr. Ngumalo and his competent team are doing. The second one was on working with the public and industry to reduce demand. And then the third one was the fact that we are going to ensure that we increase the exploitation of the picking plants, essentially to burn diesel to be able to protect the South African economy. So what we are sharing with you is nothing out of what we had promised. Essentially, it's in keeping with that strategy. And we did say, even at the time, it's going to come at a great cost to the fiscus, and that's why there's been those provisions, the 8 billion rands provided for within the NERSA approved tariff structure, and also the 22 billion rand from the National Treasury fiscal support. So I really want to emphasize that we are not surprised by these numbers. It was always part of our deliberate strategy to protect the South African economy. We did answer the question that you have to make a choice on whether you continue to burn this diesel, essentially expending a lot of money and protect the South African economy, or allow the economy to go on free fall whilst we could be spending some bit of money. Of course, we don't have that money in buckets, but we needed to do that to protect the economy. And then the second one is a point that Rudy had raised, the fact that, of course, Minister Godani at the right time will expand, but really is within the parameters of what is a cabinet decision, and these assets, they remain in the hands of the South African people, in that it is the SOE group level, is a primary sole shareholder also at the subsidiary level. So these assets are within, if you like, the domain of Eskom, and they remain public property. So that's it's an important point to make. Just coming to our viewers' question, yes, well, for me, it's less about painting a positive picture, but just sharing the facts with the general public, and your question is useful for that purpose, to help me to surface. I did make the point that at some point around April or so, we're at a historic low, 48% energy availability factor. As I speak to you, we're at about 60% plus. We know that there was a sustained period during that historic low of energy availability factor, a sustained period of stage 6 load shedding. When I stood before you, when we were sharing with you the winter outlook of Eskom, the worst case scenario was that we could even breach stage 8. We haven't seen any of that. The worst case scenario during the winter period at the peak PM focus, where we went at stage 6, and also it was for a very brief period. I don't think we're even more than 30 hours. And of course, we are beginning to see this continued improvement. I did make the point that we are given the responsibility to look for the 6,000 megawatts as an immediate intervention. I've shared with you the work that Mr. Nxumalo and the team have been doing. If you use the May as a baseline, we have gotten 2,000 megawatts, but if you had to use the period, the worst case scenario when we came on stream, we have gotten an additional 4,000 megawatts. Mr. Nxumalo stood before you just to indicate that we are expecting to return the units at Tutuka. We'll return the units at Kusile. We give you that update all the time. If you put those together, I think you are sitting at about 4,000 megawatts. And I think also the question is, at which point, Helmut, are we going to get the capacity of 32,000 megawatts? I think we're getting very close to that. And I was saying to the team that we want to account for that 32,000 megawatts outside the peaking plants, essentially the health of the generating assets, the installed capacity. Like I said, we're beginning to illustrate that there's this about anything between 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts that will come on stream as a result of a combination of Tutuka and also Kusile, and then you will see that we are getting very close to that target of 32,000 megawatts, or the deficit that we had of 6,000 megawatts. When are you going to see the back of load shedding? So it's one thing to give the comfort that there's 24 hours of met demand, so there's no lights that are off, outside the issues of the distribution infrastructure, the challenges that I mapped at the beginning of this briefing. Outside all of those, you are going to get to a stage, I'm confident, where the lights will be on. But whether you are going to sustain the lights being on and ensure that you provide the necessary capacity that is required for additional investment, the ramp up of if you like, the South African economy, and by that you are going to place additional demands on your grid, it's a different conversation. And that's why the team at transmission, part of the work that we are doing is the issues around the imports, and just to the question on when are we getting this, what we had announced the last time, the Eskom transmission team was just finalizing the legacy issues with their counterpart in Mozambique. We owed upwards of 900 million rands. A significant portion of that has been paid. There are also term sheet, or if you like, a payment agreement to defray what has been owed. And then once that conversation now is coming to an end, and then we can then get into transacting about new capacity going into the future. So they needed to clear, if you like, the historic problems that are there. And that's why it's important, that program, to help us to add additional megawatts so that we have sufficient buffer to allow the South African economy to grow at the rates that are required. And then to our colleague here from Reuters, I'm sorry, I forgot the name, Pedi or so, but I do apologize if I got the name wrong. Mr. Ngumaro does attempt to respond to that question. So we've made the point that given the crisis that is confronting us of existential proportions, we think that there are power stations that were meant to be decommissioned, closed at a particular time, that we must delay the decommissioning. So I think it's important that we underline that. And of course, it will be informed by three things. So the first is the continued safety of operating those power stations. So that's the first one. The second one is associated with them being continued to operate. And then the third one is the issues around the emissions. The team is getting assistance on modeling what the emissions are. We've got an obligation to protect, if you like, the health of communities in that area. We're committed to the issues around the international agreements in relation to the decarbonization and all of that. So we're modeling all of that. So I'm just saying we are not going into that conversation blind and say at all costs. It's issues around the safety of continued operating, the cost associated with that. And like I said, they're generating the modeling. But as I speak to you, I think the team is comfortable on those power stations that from a safety point of view and cost issue, juxtapose that with the cost to the South African economy is justified. The only leg that is missing is the modeling in relation to the emissions. And I did say that we will share with you once we get to that point. And then on the issues of the studies that is being conducted by an entity that was appointed by the National Treasury, we are yet to receive that report. And really what the study was attempting to do was trying to understand what are the implications of continuing these power stations, what are the implications on the decommissioning. Once we get that report, I'm sure, of course, it's National Treasury commission, but I'm sure it will be shared widely in government, and we will be able to get those insights. But with the team here, we have an appreciation of what it costs, what it will take for us to continue to operate, and also what are the implications to the South African economy. And then on the issues around the appointment of the ESCOM CEO, I did say I will not venture into a domain that's not mine, and I really do respect the work of the board of ESCOM. Mr. Makwana will make that determination, and of course, Minister Godan will then make the appropriate if you like, confirmation, because he's a shareholder representative. So that sits within the domain of Minister Godan, and I'm confident that he's working on that. And at the right time, Minister Godan will make that announcement, of course, working with the board of ESCOM. On the issues around consequence management, like I said, I mean, it's a managerial function. We will not enter into that space. Mr. Numalo, the CEO, and the board, they are the ones who will attend to that. I think our concern and interest is to make sure that we get Quebec dates on the return to service on time, so that Unit 1, so that it doesn't overlap into Unit 2. And as you know, that there's over 120 days delayed at huge costs in relation to Unit 1. So the outage sleep is, if you like, about 4 months, 120 days. So that's a significant amount of period, and we don't want that to overlap into the services of taking out Unit 2, which might compromise the license and the licensing of individual units, and also Quebec as a whole. We have not reached a stage where we want to decouple the two, and of course, it's the regulator that will make the determination. But I think where we are, we can control those areas, that we can control those matrices. It's important that we are able to return this Unit 1 as soon as possible, and we don't compromise, if you like, taking out Unit 2 to address the issues that have been identified as areas that requires attention. And then the imports in June, less than what was the import in January. Of course, the confirmation we've gotten was that there were technical issues on those lines that are evacuating, if you like, the electrons. Those have been attended to, and that was the main reason, really. It was a technical issues, and those issues have been attended to, and we are more than happy that we are able to to meet all those, if you like, to maximize the imports of electricity from neighboring countries. And like I said, Mr. Nxumalo is doing everything possible. We will work with them to make conditions palatable for all ESCOM employees. As he has indicated, it's not yet the case now with the GM of Tutuka not wearing bulletproof vests, not going around with a huge contingent of protectors. But like as he has indicated, we are working workstream number 6, as assisted by the South African police. They do assessment, risk assessment on all the individuals there, to the extent that the assessment will require that there has to be, if you like, an elevated attention to the security of any individual at ESCOM. We leave that to the expertise, and they'll know how to do it. But that's not the case now, as I speak to you in relation, in particular, to the question that has been asked of the general manager at Tutuka. I think that's all from the first. You want to add?
I want to just correct something
From my side.
Thanks, Minister. My apologies. I was given the diesel burn that included IPP also. So it slightly inflated the figures, so I just need to correct that. So let's start off again. In May, the budget was 2.7 billion rand, and the total amount that was burned was 3.1 billion rand. The year to date, that is from the beginning of the financial year until the end of April, the budget for diesel was 9.7 billion, and the actual figure for the amount of diesel spent is 9.2 billion. So we're well within budget, in actual fact less than that. So my sincere apologies, the data included the IPP. So please ignore the data early on. That was diesel and IPP. This is only diesel. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister and colleagues. We're now getting to the last round of questions. We will start in the room and then finish off on the online questions. Since there's none in the room, Pelly, can you take us through the online questions?
Yes. There's one question from Speaker from that business report. Will there be a suspension of load shedding during the BRICS summit, especially in the city of Johannesburg? And then Sophie Mukwena from SABC is asking if China has delivered in relation to its promise to assist South Africa with the electricity challenges, to address the electricity challenges, particularly ahead of the BRICS summit. And then if yes, in what areas are they helping? We then have Helmo again. Is asking, the economy seems to be doing better than expected. Has the demand focus been adjusted upwards? He's also asking, so we should expect more than 8,000 gigawatts of imports in July and August. I think this is a follow-up to what was said earlier. And then Terence again, Christian is coming back again, and he is asking, Minister and Rudy, today 100% of the discussion has been about improving ESCOM performance. Almost nothing talked about new generation capacity. Please can you elaborate? He's also adding, please advise EFM of Canada Power Station. Homulemo from UFM. No, Terence Klima from Engineering News is asking, given that bid Windows 7 of the Renewable Procurement Program will be launched soon, can you expect ESCOM to publish an updated generation connection capacity assessment before then? I think, did you come to an end of the questions in this round? And also, just to note that the last one I read from Tennis has been responded to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Minister, thank you, Minister.
No, thank you very much. I did say that on Kendall, the issues, power station, the issues were largely on the emission side. So if we're to run the units at their design capacity, we are going to exceed the license emission parameters. So as a result of that, the partial load losses are significantly higher. So what Mr. Numalo and the team are doing is to address, if you like, the issues associated with us remaining within the parameters of emissions whilst we are ramping up the performance of this unit to approximate the installed capacity. So that's the point we're meeting. And then, Spelele, on the, so load shedding is not a function of events or major function. For as long as generation does not meet demand, there's going to be load shedding. And that's why part of the conversation and what is being mounted before the court is that it's not always possible to exempt everyone. Otherwise, you are losing that lever of ensuring that you protect the grid, which is that lever is load shedding. So what we are doing, so what Johannesburg will be expected, if there's load shedding on the day, will be expected to make its contribution to ensuring that we protect the grid. How they allocate that, they'll make the determination. So I think it's important that we make the point. So if you happen not to see load shedding on the day, it might be two things. One is that we don't have load shedding across ESCOM. We have announced between morning and this period there's no load shedding, so therefore no one will be load shed. Or if there's no load shedding at the events of the BRICS, it could be that they are not on schedule as per Johannesburg schedule for that particular area to be load shed, or Johannesburg would have made a particular determination. So I really want to emphasize that the system operator, when he makes the determination on the intensity of load shedding, all that they are looking at is demand and available generation, and everyone must contribute, and they send out the message, cities must contribute, suburbs will contribute, and that determination will then be made by city, municipality X, municipality Y. So that's the point. And then on the question by Sophie, yes, you remember we went to China, very productive visit. And I think the conversation there was about the kind of assistance that we can get in ensuring that we are able to sustain both the quality and reliability of supply to strategic installation. I'm talking strategic here, key installations. I'm talking hospitals. I'm talking clinics. I'm talking police stations and also schools. So they've made a generous donations. We have completed all the administrative and legal requirements for us to receive that donation. So just wait, watch this space. I don't want to take out the thunder out of that announcement, because I will share that with you, working with the Chinese government in the form of the ambassador or my equivalent on the sidelines of the BRICS. So the point is that yes, the answer is yes, and it's also on key strategic installation. Spelele, you're absolutely correct. That's the point I was making earlier on, is that as and when we get to a stage where we are resolving the generation meets the demand, and we have a sustained period of no load shedding, there's going to be significant investments coming into the country, because there's a renewed confidence in the South African economy as a result of, amongst others, our ability at the time to resolve load shedding is going to place a burden on demand. And that's why we are saying that you can't get to a stage, an absolute date, and say by this date load shedding is gone. Because once there's an increased investment, there's going to be pressure on the grid for you to supply. And what that means is that you have simply postponed the problem. And that's why it's important that we are able to accelerate the issues around new generation capacity. And just going to Chris's point, well, the focus today was to give you on the performance of the power stations. We have been sharing with you about the best next bid windows, the generation capacity that will come out of those bid windows, 5,000 megawatts of PV and wind, 1,200 megawatts of battery storage, and 3,000 megawatts of gas. Minister Mantashe will open up that bid process. And we did also make the point that this time around we are also going to ensure that there's alignment to where the location of these sources of energy to where there's grid capacity. So really, it was not a neglect of a new generation. It was just the emphasis of this briefing. And I'm sure once we go out on the bid window, we're going to have a focused attention on new generation. But thank you very much, colleagues, for making time joining us. We don't take it for granted. We know it's a Sunday family day, we've got other things to do, but we think that it is important that we maintain this briefing so that we get to share with everyone in a very transparent manner where we are in relation to addressing the single most important and existential problem that is facing us in economic and social terms, which is load shedding, the kind of progress that we are making, or lack of progress. I think even in areas where we are underperforming, we'll share with you that we are underperforming, and this is the kind of measures we are taking to improve, if you like, the areas of underperformance. So again, thank you very much. May you have a blessed Sunday. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you to all media houses that have enabled this information to be broadcasted throughout South Africa and internationally. And thank you so much, colleagues. The meeting has come to an end. Thank you.